Okay, so for our first prose fiction, this is a passage adapted from Robertson Davis, What's Bred in the Bone. And Frank Cornish is a young boy in Canada during World War One. So whenever we're reading prose fiction, remember we want to pay attention to the character analysis. How would you describe that character and the interaction? How is the character relationship? So Frank's life was not at all dark. He wasn't clever, so that is not good. He wasn't clever, but he attracted Miss McGladdery's attention. So there are two characters here. So let's see what their interaction is. But he attracted Miss McGladdery's attention by the seriousness with which he applied himself in the weekly half hour that was given to art. So we know he is passionate about art. Miss McGladdery taught art as she taught everything. So she's kind of like a teacher working at a public school. You kind of have to dabble in everything. So not really a professional. And she instructed all three classes at once in the mysteries of drawing a pyramid and shading one side of it so that it appeared to have a third dimension. Or as she put it, the shaded side went back and the unshaded side stuck out. A pyramid in a circle with shading made into a ball, and as the culmination of art, an apple. Shading was done by scuffling down one side of the object with the flat of the pencil's point. So you can see this is how Miss McGladdery teaches her art class. And then we see another strong transition, but Frank did not think that was good enough. So he is actually better. Maybe that's why he attracted attention than the teacher. He had learned a craft at home, which shading was done with tiny parallel lines, achieving with great patience, even by cross-hatching. If you take the time to do all that tic-tac-toe, so this is very condescending from Miss McGladdery, right? Calling it tic-tac-toe. On your apple, you won't be finished by 4 and you'll have to stay until it's done, said Miss McGladdery. So I wouldn't say she's a very good teacher here. So he did stay in. Oh, and our Frank is very serious about his art. So he doesn't care how long it takes because he has great patience. With half a dozen other culprits who had work to finish before they were released for the weekend. And when he showed Miss McGladdery his apple at 4:30, she admitted reluctantly. So again, she's not even good at praising students. She's like, yeah, it's all right. For she did not want to encourage the boy to be fancy and try to go beyond. So overall, she's not an inspiring teacher, right? She just wants students to do the bare minimum. So she didn't want the student to try and go around what the class demanded, what she herself knew. So again, not professional. Frank could draw, which was something not required in art, and Miss McGladdery had come upon a caricature of herself done in the back of his arithmetic workbook. So you can see, yeah, he's not very good in school, so he's kind of distracted, right? But he's drawing in his math textbook. Miss McGladdery, who was a fair-minded woman, except about religion and politics, so that's kind of irony, right? If you're extreme about religion and politics, how can you be fair-minded or objective? Had no vanity, admitted to herself that it was good, so she said nothing about it. Frank was an oddity, and like a true Scot, Miss McGladdery had a place in her approval of a chill pears, so long as he did not go too far. So the word oddity, I would probably bring it out. So it shows that Frank is different from the rest of the kids, right? Staying to draw when the other kids were staying for detention. Almost every Saturday now we are switching to something that is outside of the classroom. So remember, whenever there is a shift in setting, we want to make sure we make a note of it. Almost every Saturday, Frank could escape into a world of imagination by going to the matinee at the McCrory Opera House where movies were shown. He got in for nothing because the girl at the ticket office recognized him And as he pushes 10-cent piece across the little counter, she winked and quietly pushed it back again. So you can see he's a frequent moviegoer. Then inside and into his favorite seat, which was on the aisle at the back, he didn't crowd into the front rows as did the other children. Again, he is different, right? That's why Miss McGladdery thinks he's the odd one out. He's the oddity. Riches unfolded. This is a very vague term. So remember whenever you come across vague terms in prose fiction or persuasive text, you need whatever comes follow that helps you understand. So what does it mean, riches unfolded? Since we know this is his favorite pastime, it has to be positive. An episode of a serial in which every week a noble cowboy was brought to the point of a horrible death by remorseless villains who sought to rob him of the equally noble girl he loved. Of course, it came out all right. So it all came out right at the end of episode 12, and then another great adventure was announced for the weeks to follow. So we know that, all right, the ending is still a happy ending, right? After the serial, a hilarious comedy, sometimes about the Keystone comedy cops who were as incapable of dealing with disaster as the girl in the serial. So we know he's here. The riches unfold means he's there to enjoy the excitement, the adventure, the comedy. Frank had an eye for the movie, so this is explaining why he loves movies. That took him more than action. He saw backgrounds, landscapes, and angles. So this ties back to the art class, right? He appreciates movies from an artist's perspective. Appreciates movie like an artist. So not just there for the fun. He even saw light. It was to his grandfather. So again, introduction of new character, make a note of it. See how their relationship is. The senator, powerful family, that he owed this extension of his understanding. So, inspired by grandpa. For the senator was an amateur photographer. All right, so semi-artist himself. His techniques were not sophisticated in terms of the Great War period when Frank was so often his companion. He worked with the large box camera and a tripod. With his load, he trudged happily around Blair Logie, taking pictures of this town and such of its more picturesque citizens as he could persuade to stand or sit still for the necessary number of seconds. And he drove out to the lumber camps from which his growing fortune flowed and took pictures of the men at work or standing by giant trees lying on their sides. He took pictures in his mills of young Blairogi men who were going off to war with their rifles and kit and gave copies to their families. So do you see how there is a parallel writing structure? First, it talks about McGladdery, how she teaches art, then go through the example. Then this talks about the senator, the grandpa, how he's an amateur photographer, and then how he takes the pictures. The senator never thought of himself as an artist, but strong transition. He had an eye for a picture and he was an enthusiastic pursuer of all the many sorts of light the Canadian seasons afford. He talked to Frank about it as if the boy were of his own age. So this is great interaction because it shows that they have respect for each other, right? He's not condescending like Miss McGladdery is. It's okay, right? His senatorial and grandpaternal aloofness quite disappeared. Now, you have to know the meaning of aloof. To be aloof, meaning to be quite cold and distant. So we know that this is ambivalent. Their relationship is ambivalent, meaning mixed. It can be good, it can be bad, because usually he's the authority figure, so he's quite cold. But then that kind of coldness disappears when they're on these expeditions together and he treats him like an equal in search of what he called sun pictures. It's all a question of the light, Frank, he said repeatedly. The light does it all. And he explained that all that painstaking shading in an art was related to light. And that's why Frank takes it so seriously. something which certainly had never occurred to Miss McGladdery. So the ending is a contrast between Grandpa and Miss McGladdery's attitude towards art. One is serious while the other is not. Okay, and that is it for this prose fiction.